3 men, 1 cell, 5 feet by 7 feet. That is smaller than your bathroom, now at 115-degree heat in summer. No air, no privacy, no way out. This was not a punishment for a day. For some men inside West Virginia Penitentiary, this was their life for decades. And the cell? That was actually one of the safer places to be. If this already has your attention, hit subscribe right now. What comes next is even darker. In 1866, the state of West Virginia had a problem. It had just broken away from Virginia during the Civil War, and it had no prison. So they picked a town called Moundsville and started building. They designed it to look like a castle, thick stone walls, tall towers, iron gates. The message was simple. Once you go in, you do not come out. Here is the twist that most people do not know. The men who built those walls were the same men who would later be locked inside them. Inmates laid every single stone. They were building their own cage. And when it opened in 1867, it would run for 129 years, longer than most countries have been free. When the prison first opened, each cell held 1 person. That did not last. By the time overcrowding peaked, 3 men were packed into a space the size of a parking space. 2 slept in bunks. 1 slept on the floor. The cells were stacked 5 levels high, and the ones near the top got the worst of it. Summer temperatures above 115 degrees Fahrenheit, with no ventilation and no relief. But here is what makes it stranger. Life inside was not only suffering. The prison had a library with over 5,000 books. Inmates had a band that played concerts. There was a chapel, a sports program, even baseball games against people from the outside community. Locals actually came to get their hair cut at the prison barbershop, run by inmates 50 cents a visit. So on the surface it looked almost normal. But underneath, something very different was happening. In the basement of the prison, there was a room called the Sugar Shack. It was a winter recreation area, in theory. In reality, it was the most dangerous place in the entire building, and the guards knew it. They refused to go inside. With no supervision, the Sugar Shack became the place where debts were settled, where the weak were targeted, where men were hurt badly, sometimes killed. And when a body needed to disappear, it was left right outside the door, not inside so the room would not get shut down. The Sugar Shack stayed open. The violence stayed hidden, and nobody on the outside knew a thing. If the Sugar Shack was dangerous, the North Hall was something else entirely. Inmates called it the Alamo. It held the most violent offenders in the prison, and every time guards needed to deliver food, they suited up in full riot gear, helmets, flak jackets, everything. The men inside were kept in their cells 22 hours a day. The other 2 hours? Tightly watched. By the 1980s, most of the cell locks in the prison had been picked by inmates. People were moving around freely in the middle of the night. The guards were outnumbered, and they knew it. The inmates knew it, too. It was only a matter of time before things exploded. January 1st, 1986. The holidays had left the prison short-staffed. At 5:30 in the evening, a gang of 20 men called the Avengers walked into the mess hall. Within minutes they had taken Captain Classic and 6 others hostage. Knives pressed to their throats, hands cuffed. 200 inmates joined the chaos. 16 hostages in total. 3 inmates were killed by other inmates during the riot itself. It lasted 2 full days. The governor of West Virginia personally drove to the prison to negotiate. When it was finally over, the world got a look at what had been happening inside those walls for years. And this time they could not look away. Between 1899 and 1959, 94 men were executed at this prison. For the first 50 years, it was done by hanging. Executions were public events until 1931, when a man named Frank Heyer was too heavy for the rope. The drop was too fast. He was decapitated in front of spectators. After that, executions were by invitation only. In 1951, the prison switched to the electric chair. They called it Old Sparky. It was built by an inmate named Paul Glenn, who was then immediately transferred to another prison for his own safety. 9 men were electrocuted in Old Sparky. 1 execution failed on the first attempt. A second jolt was needed. The last execution was on April 3, 1959. West Virginia abolished the death penalty entirely just 6 years later, in 1965. Old Sparky still sits in the prison today. You can see it if you visit. Among the thousands of men who passed through West Virginia Penitentiary, very few were famous. But one of the most chilling artifacts in the building is a letter that was sent to the prison, not from inside it. Charles Manson, one of the most notorious criminals in American history, wrote a letter requesting a transfer to Moundsville to be closer to family. The warden's reported response was 4 words: "When hell freezes over." The letter is still on display in the prison today. By the late 1980s, the prison was fighting battles on 2 fronts, inside its walls and inside courtrooms. Inmates had been filing lawsuits for years. The conditions were bad, and the law was starting to agree. In 1986, the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled that locking men in 5-by-7-foot cells was cruel and unusual punishment under the Constitution. The prison had 9 years left. On its last day of operation in 1995, the remaining inmates were transferred to a brand new facility called the Mount Olive Correctional Complex. The gates of West Virginia Penitentiary closed for the last time. 129 years, 94 executions, 36 confirmed murders inside the walls, and thousands of men who survived it changed forever. Today the prison is a museum. About 30,000 people visit it every year. You can walk the same halls those inmates walked. You can stand in a 5-by-7 cell and feel how small it really is. The cell walls still have the original graffiti, artwork, names, messages left by the men who lived there. Historians have documented them as cultural records. Researcher Sophie Slaughter from West Virginia University put it this way: incarcerated people were not just victims. They resisted, they organized, they created art. They found ways to hold on to their dignity inside a system designed to take it. The prison itself was designed to break people. Some were broken, but some were not. And the building that was meant to be forgotten, it is now one of the most visited historic sites in West Virginia. West Virginia Penitentiary ran for 129 years. It held tens of thousands of men. It saw riots, escapes, executions, and suffering that most people on the outside never knew about. But it also held something else, the stories of the people inside, stories of survival, of creativity, of fighting back against impossible conditions. That is what makes this place so hard to forget. It was not just a prison. It was a world unto itself, hidden behind 5-foot-thick stone walls, built by the very people it was meant to contain. If this documentary moved you, subscribe, share it with someone, and tell us in the comments. Should we go deeper on another prison story? We read every single one.